outsider looking in the sense that in a conference which touches our hearts. The HR function in any organization touches our hearts, and I'm a data scientist, kind of coming into this conference talking about really my experience in terms of looking at employee-related data. Not only at AIG but in multiple avatars in the past also. So, just a quick disclaimer, what we will be talking about here does not pertain to AIG in particular, and this has been a work which I have been doing for a very long time. So having said that, what I wanted to touch in this session was, how different predictive models can be built, validated, tested, and implemented across employee life cycle. So all the way from the time we decide to hire to the time a turnover happens, whether voluntary or involuntary. Analytics, specifically predictive analytics, can come into picture and can be applied all along. And we had this last question just now about 5 generations of people working in a company, and just very quickly came to my mind. My father, at one time in his life, had managed directly, indirectly about 50,000 people. He was the chairman and managing director of one of the big public sector company in India, and you can imagine the entire public sector company was 120,000 employees, 120,000, and after that he managed about 50,000 people. And back then I was a kid, did not understand what it takes to manage people. But one thing I very distinctly remember was, the thing like what he said was, it's very easy to manage machines, very, very difficult to manage humans. And it's very true. We have been talking about all this data problems, and does it apply to one person, doesn't apply to another person. It's very, data mining or machine learning really applies to what we call stationary data. The attributes of data should not change. The underlying statistics of the data should not change, and that is why we kind of say that, okay, if the underlying statistics is not going to change, then I can use the same distribution and apply it to new data. But when it comes to human data, the problem is the way I behave and the way somebody else behave is very different, and that is why we can't really take a statistical model and really just go ahead and apply it blindly to somebody else. Just not going to work that way. Specifically in talent analytics space, when we apply predictive models, we have to be very, very careful. Because you can build models to tell you the insight of a problem, but you should not try to take it to a step further and start predicting a lot of other things. And that brings to another point over here. Iteration, right? A lot of people have talked about it. I'm also going to talk about iteration as a use case. And in an organization, when an iteration happens, your colleague or any person who leaves the organization, most of their friends already know about it. Okay, they have a very good idea that this turnover is going to happen if it is a voluntary turnover, right? You would typically say, "हाँ यार, उसका मेरे को मालूम है," right? You will say that. If you know that, then why didn't the data know it? The answer to that question is, when you connect with that employee, you connect with that employee at a different level. You know the circumstances associated with that employee at that moment in their lives, both personal and professional, and to some extent you have a very good idea of what their benefits, compensation, and you may not know the number, you have an idea. When we build models, we do not end up accounting for every one of these parameters, and that is why these models do not perform as good as they should. Because if you knew it, if you have a very good idea here, and I kind of had a hunch, then the model should also have more than 50% probability on that. So those are the things which has to be taken into account when we are kind of touching on predictive analytics in talent domain. And so, with this, let's quickly kind of touch on the agenda. Obviously, kind of talk about holistic talent analytics, and the idea there is, let's not apply talent analytics on one use case, single use case, and try to get over it, because what we see is companies who succeed with talent analytics, and today nobody really talked about Google as a use case, but you always kind of hear Google coming out with everything, right? And so in scenarios like this, you would hear a lot that Google used to do this, right? Google was probably one of the first companies to actually apply talent analytics holistically and succeed with it. They were making data-driven decisions even when a lot of us were actually just talking about it. So having said that, I kind of personally believe that one-off application of talent analytics is probably not a great idea, and so you have to do it holistically. And so, I will very quickly take a look at two use cases, one around recruitment, one around retention. I had kind of articulated these use cases slightly differently. The recruitment use case I kind of looked at from from what a business perspective might be, and in the retention case, I kind of looked at from the data science perspective, and just to give you complexity, but as you are going through this, you would kind of realize very quickly that why these two different domains have to be brought together to solve this one problem holistically. Not to get too deep into the slide, but really some study which has basically shown how that in HR is one of the laggards in terms of applying analytics and big data solutions, and for all the probably good reasons for it. But what really are the key reasons why HR does not get, while analytics does not get applied in HR as much. Multiple factors, but typically, we saw in the last session, the gentleman was talking about, we really do not want to have HR as a statistician. You want HR as a really in HR, and but they should be able to leverage the information coming out from everybody and make a sound decision. And I think that is one of the reasons. Technology, talent, shortcomings, preparedness. More importantly, I think one really big important this thing is buy-ins. Nowadays, we do have leaders who are very willing to use such tools to get insight, but then the problem really comes into is the actionable insight part. When I say actionable insight, one of the problems which I kind of worked was around talent management, and like Google taught us so many things. One of the things Google taught us, if you have a problem, just do polling on it, right? Just have ask the people That is what the motto is. And so we kind of borrowed that culture a lot of companies have. And if you have a problem, the HR would send out a survey to everybody. Now the survey would typically be some set of questions which they want answered. And one of the questions you would not see there is, are you happy with HR function? All right, because that is not supposed to be there. However, people would respond to that question in a field called a text field, where they are supposed to say anything they want to say, right? And so when a survey like this is collated, typically what would happen? All the questions for which you had answers between strongly agree to strongly disagree and everything in between would be plotted as bar charts, right? Simple. And the text field would be run through, depending upon the size of the organization. If it is 100 people, somebody can end up reading 100 text responses. But if it is 100,000, then it will be run through what is called topic modeling, and then you extract topics out of it. And what would be the top 10, 20 topics? The topmost topic would be benefits, compensation, work-life balance, company infrastructure, and a lot of people would be talking about all the way from bad chairs to bad cabs and everything in between. However, the problem is this. So yes, you will have these bars coming up that people are talking about compensation. However, what you do not have in that report is, what are they talking about compensation? Because a leader can only make decision when they have when they know what is the clear actionable which is going to come out of this. Okay, if the compensation says that we are 20%, we as a company X is 20% below market in terms of their compensation strategy, then now the decision maker has something tangible they can do about it. But those bar charts with compensation as the biggest problem, that doesn't tell them. So these are the areas where you can actually go ahead and still implement analytics and not intrude on the problems of uniqueness of the workforce, right? So you can still use analytics to derive actionable insight and then start doing, applying those actions on it. So, again, if the person says on company's infrastructure, then what is the problem with the infrastructure? Is it again, from bad chairs because somebody has to sit on that chair for 8 hours a day, to bad commute, which is probably anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours a day for different people. So holistic talent analytics, you can find use cases in talent management, compensation, obviously, very sticky point which I would not touch a lot about, but you guys know much more than I do. Retention predictor, and obviously recruitment analysis. How can we use recruitment in analytics and recruitment in different ways, and what is required to be done there? So basically, to begin with, I think one of the biggest important factor is again, what happens when a new leader joins any organization. When the new leader joins any organization, one of the first things is, I need to build a team. Sometimes they are actually mandated, hired with the mandate that they have to build a team. But more often than not, especially in bigger technology companies with very specific mandate which top leaders get, one of the biggest mandate is go and build a team. And it's very simple. I need 5 BI guys, I need 25 programmers, I need 2 UX guys, and if I have 25 programmers, I need probably 5 testers, and things like that. However, the question really is, and this is where one can start using analytics, is, have we even done a talent gap analysis? Do we really need that talent in that team? While the leader believes it does, but does the data support it? Right? To begin with, so that is where, even before you get the resumes indoor, you should start thinking about, do I really need that skill in that team or not? Or if I have similar skills in other teams, should we leverage it? And there are challenges around it, but obviously a good question to ask. All the way to candidate sourcing, resume shortlisting, obviously a lot of buzzword around using natural language understanding, scraping LinkedIn, finding key tags, and then matching tags and associated work around that. Screening and interviewing, another skill. Again, some of the more mature companies around this have worked very hard to create a cost function which optimizes the weighted parameters of the candidate's score, the candidate's background, the score which the interviewer gave to the candidate, and multiple other things, and kind of optimize that to find a holistic score. And those score along with certain metric like time to hire, the quality of the candidate, and the probabilities associated with whether the candidate is going to join or not, and multiple other things can be optimized. And this is really how we can end up optimizing the entire recruitment cycle, if we may. One thing I kind of forgot, that there was a poll. I don't know if you guys saw that or not, but if we did, then the poll was really around. Do we have any responses to the poll? Or if we don't have an immediate response, maybe now that you guys know, you can talk about it. But the question really was, have you seen something like this in your organization? 100 applications coming in, and out of 100, 12 people, 50 got shortlisted, 12 people were called for interview, 2 offers were rolled out, and 1 guy actually joined the organization. Does it sound familiar to this group? I see a lot of heads nodding, right? Does it? It does, right? Frustration in our jobs, right? Obviously. That is exactly the reason why you need recruitment analytics. That is exactly the reason. Okay? Because you have to, that is the key reason why you need to optimize your entire work. This is where recruitment analytics would typically come in. And then, we can kind of break down the problem down into multiple things, like, small tasks, and optimize each one of them, and things like that. But oh yeah, 100% yes. What is, how many people actually took it? So good. Sounds good. So we may, at least we all agree in this room that there is one use case which is important. Let's look at retention from the data science perspective a little bit. So what are the typical predictors of retention, right? Again, a lot of things which we can put in. Simple things like benefit compensation, obviously. You can put in the yearly review they have given to the managers, or 360-degree review in certain ways. Age of the candidate, as well as age, how many years they have been in the system, so age on network, and employee grades as in like which which management cadre they come into, or what is their a proxy for their hierarchy in the organization of sort, and what skills they kind of have, and things like that. You can build all these things. What obviously you don't really see here is the human factor, the factor which is very, very difficult to measure, right? So that is the factor which basically says, okay, yeah, that person I kind of knew, versus the model predicting or not predicting that person. If you can have a way of capturing those intangibles, then that is really the key. But ultimately, if I have that, then these things, then I can kind of put it into a predictor model, and then you provide a probability score from low score being high risk candidate to a high score where I'm fairly certain that the candidate is going to survive for the say next 6 months to 9 months in the system. Obviously, very dynamic model. The data is changing on a very, very fast pace. The economic situation changes very quickly. So, that being, if you just put economic situation as one of the parameters in the model, then your model is changing very fast. How are we going to use it? So there are certain parameters which are numeric, like age. Then there are certain parameters which are text, like feedbacks, categorical. Ordinal parameters are, where numeric data actually, where categorical data, meaning A, B, C, D, E, has significance in terms of A is closer to B and A is far away from E, and things like that. So these things are handled differently in machine learning algorithms, and so they have to be treated differently. And ultimately, what you are coming out is a probability score. How are you going to measure that is the real tricky situation, because now even if I tell you that an employee X has is at high risk of turnover, what do you really do with it? Because it goes back to actionable insight, right? One thing you can do is you can ask the HR or the manager to come in and provide an intervention of some sort. But that kind of creates a problem. We will skip this slide. So this is actually, we are coming into model evaluation part, right? What can we really do? How do we evaluate, given a probability against a candidate? How do I really evaluate whether the person was actually at risk or not? So, you can basically just wait and watch and see for 3 months whether the candidate has actually left or not. The good thing is, if the candidate left, the good thing is, yay, my model worked, yay. The bad thing is the candidate actually left, so you have nothing to do with it, right? So the problem here is different. Now, if you have an intervention, timely intervention, and correct intervention, then what happens? Then the candidate stays. But the model never really knows whether the candidate was being predicted or not. Because the candidate is not going to tell you that I was actually about to leave, but your intervention saved me. Those would be personal information, and I'm not going to disclose that, right? So that is where the conundrum is. How do you really end up validating whether the model saved the candidate or otherwise? Other way of doing this is, I identify an at-risk population, and I basically do an A/B testing. I basically divide that population into 2 different groups, and I kind of knew from my this thing that the green guys are actually, the colors are inverted, so the green guys are at risk. So I have 33% of people who are at risk in each group, and I have provided intervention, achievement opportunities, monetary this thing, approvals, and all sorts of interventions which you guys know better than I do, frankly, what you can save an employee within the organization. And then what happens is, after the intervention is applied, After the intervention is applied, I have 10 extra guys hanging out, so 20% candidates who were saved from this. You can do this A/B testing and run it through the system. Again, the problems are the same. The 50% who left is the loss to the organization. That's one thing. The other thing is it's a time-taking process. Goes through multiple iterations within an organization and multiple different problems. So, obviously we can see that talent analytics can help the organization in multiple ways. We kind of touched on all of those, all the way from sourcing the talent to finding retention and compete differently within a very competitive environment. At this point of time, I'll open the floor for questions, comments, or suggestions. One quick this thing, I actually wrote a white paper on exactly the same topic with a friend of mine, Manish Gupta, and the white paper is actually distributed to you guys through an email which would have come through from People Analytics yesterday. Take a look at it. If you have comments, questions, do connect with us. It's an intriguing problem. I would say that there is no clear one answer to this problem, mostly because the data is very dynamic, and that makes that is why we call human resources as human resources. Otherwise, we could have just called it resources, right? And that is the differentiation.
All right, we have a couple of questions that have come up on Slido. So let's look at first.
How can predictive analytics be used to predict depression in introvert employee without invading their personal space? I would say, let it be done by the professionals. That is where your HR function is there in the organization. Predictive analytics is not really meant to invade. I really don't know the answer to this question, frankly. It's not really meant to solve all the problems in the world. It is just not. If you're trying to solve all the problems in the world, it's not.
Yeah, there could be some patterns, like for example, you can possibly monitor the leave pattern. Again, it doesn't tell you anything, but I think many organizations have employee assistance programs, so how many people are leveraging that? But again, I think there's a privacy issue.
Next question, are there external data sources available to benchmark attrition risk that can be used to augment internal analysis? That's a very good question. The answer to that question is yes and no. There are data sources available and we can take it offline. The no part of the question is, will that be applied to every employee in your organization? Again, you have to be very careful. What I heard from a lady, manufacturing company, if you have machine operators who have operated the same machine, a lathe machine, for example, for 15 years, 20 years, and if you apply a data model which is trained on, say software engineers, it would have its own limitations. Okay, so while there are data sources available for predicting employee turnover, voluntary employee turnover, but it really depends upon how it's being applied. Okay, another 15 seconds to go. There's a few more questions, please.
When it comes to attrition model, human behaviors are very important. Have you observed some of these human behaviors as features?
Sure.
For example.
So the question is, when it comes to iteration models, what are the key features which come up. And typically the features which come up, you can kind of collate this with to some accuracy with your exit interview, even though people may not be very forthcoming in exit interviews, but you can kind of correlate this. Compensation definitely comes out as one of the most important factor. However, growth within the organization is a close second. People very this thing, especially in today's day and age of Facebook and LinkedIn, when employees see their colleagues who, especially 0 to 5 year age experience, when employees see their colleagues moving places very quickly, that gives out a very important factor in terms of 80% of my graduating class has changed jobs. It's my turn now, and so those are the factors which definitely comes up.
Actually, human behavioral features. I'm asking about the human behavioral features.
Human behavior features difficult to attribute in the model. So I would, I haven't put any human behavior features in the models which I have put in.
All right, on that
Sounds
note,
good.
thank you so much, Nishant, for your time.
Great. Thank you, everybody.